This video summarizes the book, The Creation of Supermen, 1986 by Dr. Raymond W. Bernard in a world where the release of our sexual fluids is considered normal and abused. Dr. Raymond's clear scientific teachings will open your eyes so that you never waste your life essence again. It is time to wake up and understand the true functioning of our reproductive organs and the inestimable value of the secretions they produce. No medication, dietary supplement, physical exercise, or meditation can replace the value of our sexual secretions. We promise you this for the end of video. You will think twice before wasting the source of power God has given you. When a man loses his seed in a generation or a sexual act, he loses his creative substance and, in doing so, hastens his death. He may not know the reasons for his constant awareness of the unpredictability of life and his persistent fear of death. But this awareness exists in the average person, provided he is sincere and willing to acknowledge it. This state of awareness is caused by the loss of a life that must be preserved in the body for its own health and greater vitality and strengthening of the spirit. The punishment for the waste of vital fluid is not an act of supernatural revenge, but the physiological consequence of the loss of the power that animates the body does not occur suddenly but gradually. This gradual death, which we call old age, is the natural result of sexual indulgence. Old age is simply the product of weakened sexual glands as a result of previous abuse. Prove the following statements of Dr. Voronov: decrepit old people are actually eunuchs. They were neutered. I've never met one who lived much past 60 before they died. They look old, and one might be tempted to attribute a very advanced age to them, but that would be a pure illusion. They look very old indeed. They have dry skin, bloated bodies, dull eyes, and their bulging front doors make them look over 100 years old. Their deaths appear to be the normal end of old age, but fact-checking usually indicates they died between 50 and 60 years. Their appearance is the result of the fact that, deprived of the essential factor of youth and vigor, they aged prematurely and died well before the term usually reached by normal men. The absence of internal secretions from the sexual glands leads to a shorter life span. A body without these crucial organs, which, when removed, result in poor blood quality, fragile bones, weaker muscles, an increase in fat, and imperfect nutrition, inevitably undergoes a general weakening, becomes more sensitive and less able to resist the factors that usually cause death long before the end of normal physiological life. Then it can be said that deprivation of the internal secretion of the interstitial glands accelerates the onset of old age and shortens life. On the other hand, maintaining this source of vital energy is the best guarantee of longevity. Men with active interstitial glands, whose functioning does not cease, live to a very old age. If an elderly man can be temporarily a human being rejuvenated by the implantation of the testicles of a goat or a monkey, would surely never have aged so much if he had reached his normal state through a continental life. Senility, a consequence of sterility or impotence, is a consequence of persistent sexuality. Weakened genital glands, like any other fragile part of the body, can be restored to their normal state by the conservation of their secretions and by the purification of the blood through a natural diet. Medieval alchemists were truly endocrinologists, and Magnus Opum were not seeking to artificially create gold from lead, but to sublimate and refine sexual energy. This, deprived of a lower outlet, was converted into higher cerebral power by the ascent of the Kundalini, force from the pelvis to the brain. The preservation and transmutation of this vital force constituted their elixir of eternal youth and the secret to the physical immortality they sought. Dr. Brinkley Jr., an eminent endocrinologist, explains the physiological reasons for the sex hormone conservation as follows: I have not deviated from my original conception that the source of all human energy is sexual energy, which is another way of saying that the glandular system of man is a chain system of connected series of loops that either help or depress each other, the secretions of which the genital gland seems to have the most direct power to stimulate and to some extent to dominate the human body and mind by its particular type of hormones. The hormones manufactured by the sex glands and distributed throughout the bloodstream to nourish all the body's tissues An English physician, Dr. Nags, writes on this very subject. Strict continence allows the essence of these sexual secretions to be reabsorbed into the body. This not only contributes to health, but also develops those creative, intellectual, and intuitive faculties that manifest in the work we do. Moreover, when we learn to control this reproductive function, to turn inward, the powerful forces it represents, we solved one of the important problems of existence that bring us closer to that high, superhuman stage which we must eventually reach. The disease of senility can be cured permanently. Death is not a sudden event. It is the end of a slow process of dying. This death, or cellular disintegration, can begin at birth. It is accelerated by the consumption of dead, rotting food, and by the loss of seminal fluid. This fluid, when retained in the body, becomes the elixir of eternal youth. Undeveloped men and women believe that sex is a game, something that its sole purpose is to entertain them. But evolved men and women know that this creative power has far greater uses than the mere waste of their thoughtless leisure. The sexual glands are the engines of the human body, the generators of organic energy. This energy, if conserved, can become the driving force behind all of life's achievements. The widespread idea that most geniuses have led immoral lives is false. As a study of their biographies demonstrates, it is rather the opposite in the case of creative capacity. Whether artistic or intellectual, lines are the sublimated expression of this same vital energy that the average individual usually dissipates through sexual means. Consequently, the supermen and great geniuses of the past invariably led strictly continental lives. The few talented individuals who did not do so cannot be ranked among the most spiritually elevated. Their work lacks that subtlety found in a Beethoven symphony or a Leonardo da Vinci painting. It results solely from a sublimation of sexual energy. Apollonia of Tyana, who at the age of 20, I said that I was resolved never to marry and to abstain from the company of all women who are the following famous people, led strictly persecuted lives. John the Baptist and Jesus, the greatest of prophets, H. Pia. Thomas Aus, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Teresa of Avila, Joan of Arc and Savola, the greatest of mystics and martyrs. Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, Francis, Bacon, Spinoza, Lietzlo, Pascal and Kant, the greatest of philosophers, Newton, the greatest of scientists, Manchego and Beethoven, the greatest of composers, and Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo and Raphael, the greatest painters. The following great men lived on the continent during the creative period of their lives. 0. Moses, Buddha, St. Paul, Plutarch, St. Augustine, Dante, St. Francis, Hermes, Dear Art, Deus, Milton and Schopenhauer. The chastity of supermen is due not only to spiritual and ethical principles but also to physiological reasons which constitute a set of physiological facts dealing with the origin and transformations of vital energy and the intimate relationship existing between the genital glands and the lymphatic, vascular and nervous systems. The human body, like a dynamo, draws electrical energy directly from the ether through pulmonary and cutaneous respiration. The etheric power is absorbed and accumulated in the solar plexus, the battery of the sympathetic nervous system. This electrical energy, known as life force, then moves to the sexual glands. Here, combined with elements of the blood, it condenses into seminal fluid. This secretion transports the vital energy to various endocrine glands, nerve centers and organs of the body in women. Sexual secretion starts in the ovaries and passes through the fallopian tubes to the uterus. In men, it starts in the testes and passes through the vastus, deferens to the seminal vesicles. The uterus and seminal vesicles act as a receptacle and are surrounded by lymphatic vessels that quickly absorb the sexual fluid. The seminal or ovarian fluid is absorbed through the lymphatic system and accumulates in the receptacle. It then circulates through the thoracic duct to the left subclavian vein, which enters the heart. This vitalizes the blood and allows it to... They transform inert food into living tissue distributed throughout the body by the cerebral artery. The transformed sexual secretion travels to the brain by the He, blood nourishing and energizing its cells in the choroid plexus of the third cerebral ventricle and the pituitary body. It is converted into cerebrospinal fluid and pituitrin circulating in the brain cavity and spinal column, generating nervous electricity. the constant loss of seminal fluid, reduces cerebrospinal fluid, resulting in a devitalized nervous system called neurasthenia. During sleep, a new supply from the cerebrospinal fluid. Energy is produced, absorbed from the ether by the sympathetic nervous system, transported by sexual secretion. Electrically recharges the central nervous system after daily activities, depletes the energy stored in the cerebrospinal fluid. Drowsiness or desire to sleep occurs. Recharging takes 3 to 5 hours, and excessive sleep can dissipate the newly generated energy by uncontrolled brain activity in dreams, by sexual secretion. Essential elements to nourish brain cells and nerves undergo a transformation of its raw state, obtained from food into a vitalized state, suitable for incorporation into nervous tissue. The sexual glands serve as centers of phosphorus metabolism (M), extracting raw phosphorus from assimilated food, chemically transforming it in its secretion for absorption and utilization by brain cells. Many losses of this vital fluid, whether voluntary or involuntary, deplete the blood of phosphorus, depriving the brain of necessary nutrition. Every drop of seminal fluid lost brings disease, nervous disorders, mental decline, old age, and death approach if the loss of vital energy, which includes the flow of vaginal and uterine secretions in women, particularly pronounced at the beginning and end of menstruation, is not limited. One is like a leaky vessel continually losing the water of life and slowly dying. A seminal emission represents the escape of developing brain tissue. The ancient beliefs concerning two distinct sexual secretions, one internal produced by the interstitial cells and the other external produced by the reproductive glands, have been abandoned. The secretions of the genital glands, including those of the uterus, seminal vesicles, ovaries, and testes, form an inseparable unit. All of these are continuously produced and absorbed by the lymphatic system. Sperm and eggs are not produced intermittently for the purposes of reproduction, but are continually absorbed by the lymphatic system into the bloodstream and perform an internal function. Any release of seminal fluid results in a loss of internal secretion, which is essentially identical to external secretion when preserved. Absorbed and utilized physiologically, there is essentially only one sexual secretion, the so-called external, being pathological. To escape this, Dr. Brinkley, the endocrinologist, says in summary that my opinion is that the external and internal secretions of the gonads are equally valuable for the construction of body tissues, and that the gonads themselves are not merely a link in the endocrine chain. The gonads in the endocrine chain are the master position, and the well-being of all endocrines depends on it. Exactly on the well-being of the gonads. Defective thyroid glands can be repaired more easily by repairing the gonads, and thus with all the glands of the chain, the thyroid, pituitary, and pineal, closely linked to the mental and spiritual life of an individual, are directly influenced by the absorbed sexual fluid carried by the blood. There is a close interdependence between the genital and thyroid glands, as well as between the latter and the brain. Insufficient thyroid secretion leads to the development of a certain time. A decrease in sexual secretion leads to physical and mental underdevelopment. At puberty, an increase in sexual secretion in the blood leads to an increase in thyroid secretion, thus promoting rapid physical and mental development. Conversely, a decrease in sexual secretion during senility leads to a shrinking of the thyroid, resulting in physical and mental degeneration. Dr. Voroff writes that no organ can preserve its vital energy and function at full capacity if its cells are not stimulated and invigorated by the internal secretion of the genital gland. Eunuchs is a very clear demonstration of this. All its organs are similar to those of the rest of humanity, with one exception. The deprivation of this organ depresses and weakens the functioning of all the others and causes premature aging. The removal of these organs reacts on the brain, but also on the heart, muscles, bones, and all other organs. Moral and physical energies are diminished. Abelard, the brilliant poet, did not write a single verse after his castration, although he led a pure and orderly life. The sexual secretions are reabsorbed, returning to the circulation ready to form the finest cerebral, muscular, and nervous tissue. This vital essence of man brought back and diffused throughout his system makes him virile, strong, courageous, and heroic. The cessation of the use of the genital organs is accompanied by a marked increase in bodily and mental vigor, and a spiritual life. Nature finds another use for the unexpended, sexual energy by employing it for the construction of a more vital and durable brain. Canina and nerves and powerful and subtle chemical elements are secreted in the muscles of the sex glands of animals and humans. These elements are absorbed into the blood and then transported to all parts of the body to energize, tone and strengthen cells, organs and body parts, including the brain and nervous system. Some have even proposed that aging is primarily due to a decrease in these secretions. Nature intended that all secretions from the sex glands in both men and women be preserved forever. Inside the body, like the secretions of other endocrine glands, the sexual glands are the only ones whose secretions can escape. Therefore, the fundamental cause of glandular disorders and the pathological symptoms that accompany them must be sought here. The normal development and well-being of body, mind, and soul directly depend on this absorbed sexual fluid. Therefore, a fully fulfilled life is the only healthy, natural, and creative life.